Let's be honest, many individuals today focus heavily on external validation. Luxury items, designer attire, rehearsed conversation starters, constant online messages. Yet, many still find themselves ignored, left without response, or wondering where they went wrong. Meanwhile, there's another approach. Some individuals don't seek attention. They don't pursue excessively. They don't request validation or over-explain themselves. They enter a room with quiet confidence, and others, particularly potential partners, notice them. Not because they're loud or showy, but because they're calm. Grounded. Present. Steady. This person lives by a different philosophy. They aren't controlled by reactions or external disorder. They don't seek external approval, they create internal value. Their strength comes from within. This is the centered individual. And most potential partners are naturally drawn to this quality. Why? Because in a world full of noise, uncertainty, and disorder, they represent peace, stability, strength. And these qualities are traits no external possessions can replace. In this video, we're exploring what makes this centered approach so appealing. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. We'll discuss the mindset, the discipline, and the lifestyle that transforms ordinary individuals into leaders, and why that transformation changes how others perceive you on a fundamental level. This isn't about techniques or strategies. This is about self-improvement. Becoming the kind of person who earns respect without raising their voice. The kind of person who doesn't just attract others, but inspires them. If you're ready to stop pursuing and start leading, then this is where it begins. Welcome to the mindset of the centered individual. So, what exactly defines this approach? At its core, the centered person is calm, not because life is easy, but because they've learned how to control their reaction to it. They're rational, even when situations become intense. They're emotionally mature, which means they experience everything, but they're not controlled by their feelings. They've mastered the art of responding, not reacting. And most importantly, they're focused on self-improvement, on becoming better, stronger, wiser, every single day. They don't waste energy arguing with reality or discussing things outside their control. Instead, they ask themselves, what can I control right now? And then they take action, even if that action is simply maintaining their composure. This is the true centered archetype. And in a world that's constantly pulling your attention in countless directions, that kind of self-discipline is rare, and incredibly appealing. Now, let's contrast that with what we often see in today's world. Many individuals today believe, directly or indirectly, that their worth comes from external factors, finances, appearance, position, social validation. So, they pursue these things endlessly, hoping they'll finally feel confident once they've succeeded. But internally, they remain anxious, uncertain, easily disrupted. You can recognize this approach quickly. They overreact when ignored. They become frustrated when things don't go as planned. They constantly seek validation, from others, from social platforms, from strangers. And that need? It distances the very people they're trying to connect with. The centered individual, however, builds value from within. Their mindset isn't, I need their approval. It's, I understand who I am, and if they recognize my value, wonderful. If not, I'll continue forward. Ancient wisdom from philosophers puts it well. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That one statement contains profound insight. Most people spend their energy trying to control things beyond their influence, others' opinions, outcomes, rejection, attention. But the centered approach takes a different path. They protect their mindset. They manage their emotions. They train themselves to remain composed during challenges. Let me illustrate. Imagine someone who's been in a relationship for 2 years. One day, unexpectedly, their partner ends things. Maybe they say the connection has faded. Maybe they've met someone else. Most individuals in that situation, they become desperate. They plead. They send numerous messages. They express anger or despair. But the centered individual, they acknowledge the pain. They don't pretend it doesn't affect them, but they don't let the hurt determine their actions. They don't pursue desperately or try to prove their worth. They reflect. They consider their role, learn from it, and then release. Quietly. With dignity. And here's the interesting part, even if that person doesn't return, and they might, they'll remember that composure. Because emotional balance is unforgettable. That kind of strength leaves a lasting impression. This is the difference. The centered individual doesn't try to win someone back. They focus on becoming someone others would value deeply. And beyond that, they don't base their identity on whether someone stays or leaves. Their self-worth isn't negotiable. It's not offered for approval. It's developed through discipline, challenges, reflection, and purpose. Today's world doesn't need more people who react to everything. It needs more people who respond, with wisdom, with strength, with clarity. That's the centered approach. And that's the kind of person others are drawn to. Not because they're pretending to have strength, but because they genuinely possess it. Now that we've explored what defines this centered approach, let's discuss why others are so naturally drawn to it. Not just theoretically. Not just ideally. In real situations. In daily life. Let's start with the foundation. 1. Emotional balance. A centered individual isn't without emotion, they simply don't allow emotions to control them. They feel deeply, but they channel that energy productively. They don't lose composure. They don't break down when facing obstacles. They remain grounded. Now imagine this in a relationship. There's disagreement. Perhaps one person is upset. Perhaps they're testing emotional responses, not intentionally, but because people often feel secure when they know their partner can handle emotional situations without becoming overwhelmed. And instead of responding with frustration or defensiveness, they remain calm. They listen. They breathe. They respond thoughtfully, not impulsively. That's emotional balance. And to others, that's not just impressive, it's reassuring. A person feels more comfortable around someone who can maintain composure, not increase tension. That security establishes trust, connection, and lasting attraction. Because they understand, this person remains steady during difficulties. 2. Purpose-driven living. Let's acknowledge, distraction is common today. Many people spend hours scrolling, gaming without purpose, moving between activities without direction. But the centered individual? They're different. They're not aimless, they're motivated. They might be developing a business, improving a skill, maintaining physical health, or simply growing personally each day. Whatever their focus, they have internal motivation that doesn't depend on others. They begin each day with intention. And this, again, appeals to potential partners. Why? Because people respect those who know their direction. They don't expect perfection, but they appreciate feeling that you're moving towards something meaningful. That you have objectives. Vision. Discipline. It's naturally appealing. Consider this, someone is learning professional skills. They study consistently, commit to projects, and improve weekly. They might not have achieved financial success, yet. But they're progressing. Focused. And that quiet determination. It demonstrates strength. Because purpose gives direction. And direction creates presence. 3. Clear values and principles. One of the most appealing qualities, though rarely discussed openly, is someone with clear principles. The centered individual knows what they value. And more importantly, they know what they won't accept. They don't tolerate disrespect. They don't explain themselves to those who manipulate. They don't pursue someone who consistently ignores them. Why? Because their dignity isn't negotiable. Imagine someone they've been seeing suddenly becomes distant. They start responding minimally, barely communicating, canceling plans. The average response might be sending multiple messages, overthinking, trying harder, asking what's wrong. But the centered individual, they notice the change, and respectfully step back. No drama. No desperate pursuit. Just a quiet, internal decision, this doesn't align with what I value. And they continue forward. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. And interestingly, that exact response often renews the other person's interest. Because they realize this individual isn't emotionally dependent on them. They won't compromise their standards merely for approval. And that principle, it distinguishes them from most others. 4. Presence and listening ability. Many people rush to demonstrate their value. To impress. To dominate conversations. To showcase their knowledge. But the centered individual, they understand the power of calmness. They listen more than they speak. They pay attention. They ask thoughtful questions. They pause before responding. This kind of presence is uncommon. And that's why it's powerful. When someone speaks with them, they feel truly understood, not just heard. Because they're not simply waiting for their opportunity to talk. They're genuinely present with the words. With the energy. With the emotions. And that presence builds connection. Ancient wisdom teaches. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. That's practical wisdom. Many underestimate the power of listening. But if you want to stand out, practice being present. Not pretending interest. Not prepared responses. But complete, calm attention. When someone slows down, maintains eye contact, and genuinely listens, it transforms the interaction. It demonstrates confidence. Maturity. Patience. Control. That's the kind of person others want to be around. Not just for conversation, but for life. So let's summarize. People are drawn to the centered individual because of 4 powerful qualities. They're emotionally balanced and maintain composure during challenges. They live with purpose and move towards something meaningful beyond themselves. They have strong principles and honor their self-respect. And they're fully present, able to listen, connect, and remain calm in a noisy world. These aren't techniques. They're foundations. And when you live this way, not just perform it, others don't just notice. They gravitate toward you. Let's clarify something important. When people hear centered individual, they might initially misunderstand. They imagine someone cold, unexpressive, who never smiles, never laughs, never shows warmth. A mechanical, distant presence who's simply too controlled to experience emotions. But that's completely inaccurate. The core principle isn't emotional suppression. It's emotional discipline. A centered person feels everything, love, loss, joy, sadness, but they've learned not to let those emotions control them. They don't lose composure, become overwhelmed, or overreact. They acknowledge what they feel, reflect, and choose the most beneficial response, not the most immediate one. Consider historical figures who demonstrated this quality. They governed nations, faced continuous challenges, loss, betrayal, and yet remained composed and compassionate. Ancient wisdom teaches. If you are affected by anything external, the discomfort comes not from the thing itself, but from your perception of it, and this you have the ability to change at any moment. That's what this philosophy teaches. Your power is internal. Not performative. Not reactive. You don't ignore reality, you master your response to it. Now let's make a comparison that illustrates this clearly. The centered person is grounded. When something challenging occurs, perhaps their partner says something hurtful, or life presents an unexpected obstacle, they pause. They process. Then they speak or act with clarity. The reactive individual. They express anger. They panic. They need reassurance. They send messages continuously. They raise their voice or withdraw. They need someone to address their emotions because they haven't developed the internal resources to manage themselves. And here's where misunderstanding happens. The reactive individual may seem passionate, emotional, or vulnerable, but in reality, they're emotionally unbalanced. Their feelings affect everyone around them. And eventually, that becomes exhausting. People don't want someone without emotions. But they trust someone who can experience emotion, without being overwhelmed by it. Consider this: a centered individual experiences deep connection. But then, unexpectedly, the relationship ends. They're not unaffected, they feel that loss. But instead of becoming desperate, they take time to reflect. To grow. They write their thoughts. They maintain their physical health. They focus on their purpose. They acknowledge the loss without losing themselves. Compare that to a reactive individual in the same situation. They message continuously, demanding explanation, assigning blame, questioning what they did wrong, requesting another opportunity. Who do you think earns more respect, even after the relationship ends? The one who remained calm, focused, and respectful. Not the one who made the other person the center of their emotional world. This philosophy doesn't transform you into someone mechanical. It develops you into someone with range, who can handle intense emotions without losing balance. It's a framework that builds resilience, clarity, and inner peace. It lets you be kind without being easily influenced. Strong without being aggressive. Caring without being dependent. It's not cold, it's level-headed. It's not distant, it's disciplined. So when someone says, centered individuals just don't express emotions, understand, they're not recognizing the power behind the calm. And that power? It's what distinguishes these individuals from others. Now you understand what defines this centered approach, and why others are naturally drawn to it. But here's the important question: how do you develop these qualities? The answer is found in small, consistent practices performed regularly. This approach isn't something you learn once, it's something you live. Every day. Let's explore the daily habits that build this foundation from the beginning. 1. Morning reflection. Each morning, take 5 quiet minutes and consider this question: what can I influence today? This prepares your mind to focus on your internal power, not what happens around you, but how you respond. Manage your breathing. Your schedule. Your attitude. Everything else. Accept it as it is. 2. Practice quiet contemplation. We live in a noisy world, opinions everywhere, distractions constant. But the centered individual isn't reactive. They're reflective. Take time each day, even just 10 minutes, to sit quietly. No devices. No audio. Just you and your thoughts. That quiet becomes your resource, because clarity develops there. 3. Study wisdom literature. Nourish your mind. Read classical philosophy, or modern interpretations of ancient wisdom. These aren't just historical texts, they're practical guides for contemporary life. Note important passages. Consider them. Apply them. 4. Practice self-discipline. In a world of immediate gratification, self-discipline becomes exceptional. Resist the urge to scroll continuously, consume unhealthy options, or pursue temporary satisfaction. When you practice self-discipline, you grow stronger. You develop the mental capacity to choose long-term growth over immediate comfort. And that strength? It's uncommon and appealing. 5. Breathe before responding. When emotions increase, frustration, concern, worry, don't respond immediately. Pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what result do I want from this situation? That simple breath creates opportunity for thought. And in that space, wisdom develops. True personal transformation begins with the questions you ask yourself regularly. Here are 3 that will reshape your behavior, emotions, and outcomes. 1. Can I influence this situation? You'll encounter criticism, rejection, delays, disappointment, pressure. But none of these are completely within your control. What is? Your response. Your focus. Your principles. If it's beyond your influence, release your attachment to it. 2. Will this matter in 5 years? This question immediately reduces most concerns. They didn't respond to your message. Your colleague annoyed you. Someone disagrees with you online. Consider the broader perspective. If it won't matter in 5 years, don't give it significant attention now. 3. What would a disciplined individual do? Before each decision, ask this. Would they scroll aimlessly or read something meaningful? Complain about circumstances or address the situation? React emotionally or respond thoughtfully? Use this question as your guide. Follow it, and you become that person. You don't need perfection. You don't need to impress anyone. But if you can manage your emotions, build discipline, and guide yourself, you become appealing without trying. The centered individual doesn't need to pursue. They develop, and through development, they attract. So take the first step. Ask the questions. Breathe through challenges. Choose long-term growth. And with each small action, you improve. Let's conclude with clarity. We've discussed what defines this centered approach: the calm during uncertainty, the stability during challenges. This person isn't trying to impress, control, or manipulate. They simply are. Grounded. Purposeful. Present. That alone makes them stand out, because in a world full of noise, self-focus, and emotional reactivity, peace is powerful. And peace is attractive. The centered individual doesn't pursue excessively. They don't need to. Their focus, discipline, and presence naturally draw others to them. They're uncommon, and that's what makes them compelling. Others don't want someone who suppresses emotion. They want someone who can experience emotion appropriately. Someone who listens deeply, responds thoughtfully, and acts with integrity. That's what creates security. That's what earns respect. It's not about projecting confidence. It's about internal alignment. Peace. Purpose. Presence. That's what the centered individual embodies. And remember, this is a journey. You don't become this person immediately. It's a daily practice, a mindset shift, a discipline. But every step you take toward this approach, you become stronger. Calmer. Clearer. You begin guiding yourself. And once you do that, everything changes. Let me leave you with a powerful reminder from ancient wisdom. Waste no more time discussing what a good person should be. Be one. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. You don't need more validation, more approval, more permission. You already have what you need. Now it's time to develop it. So if you're on this journey with me, if you're building that inner strength, that centered presence, drop a person in lotus position in the comments. Let me know you're committed. This isn't just content, it's a community. Let's grow together. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's more coming: explorations of philosophy, personal development, mindset, relationships, discipline, everything you need to build a stronger, calmer, more grounded version of yourself. Because true strength doesn't announce itself. It stands confidently. Stay focused. Stay grounded. And I'll see you in the next video.